The hunt, predator and prey. The cold wind lashed against his face as Nick Cade bolted from his car, plunging into the dense forest. His heart pounded wildly, his lungs burned with exertion. He didn't dare look back. He knew the chase was already too close. How did I end up here? Flashed through his mind. It had all started 2 days ago. Nick was a private detective in the small town of Havenridge. Business was bad, just petty thefts and cheating spouses. But when a man in an expensive suit walked into his office and offered $50,000 to find his missing son, Nick knew something was off. His client was Daniel Cross, a powerful businessman whose son, Eric, had vanished a week ago. The last place he had been seen was near the old abandoned hotel, St. Haven, deep in the woods. Easy case, Nick had thought. He was wrong. On his first night investigating the ruins of the hotel, something had been watching him from the darkness. Eyes, red, burning, unblinking. And then came the howl, a long, chilling sound that froze the blood in his veins. Now Nick was running. Something was after him. He could feel its breath on the back of his neck. A werewolf. And then everything changed. A shadow darted between the trees, and Eric Cross appeared before him. But he was no longer human. Long claws, a predatory silhouette, exposed fangs dripping with saliva. "Run!" he growled, his voice a mixture of human desperation and beastly menace. Behind them, another roar echoed, deep, guttural, terrifying. Nick spun around, a second werewolf. Bigger, stronger. Its eyes glowed with icy fire. Eric lunged at it, and the two monsters clashed in a violent battle. Nick, unable to believe what he was witnessing, took a step back. What now? Run? Stay? The answer to Eric's disappearance was right in front of him, but did he really want to know it? Nick watched in shock as the two beasts tore into each other, claws slashing, fangs ripping. Their roars shook the night, sending birds fleeing from the treetops. Eric, the boy Nick had been hired to find, was fighting for his life. He moved with deadly precision, muscles flexing with each strike. But the second werewolf, it was stronger, more experienced. Its attacks were calculated, its speed unnerving. Nick took a step back, but a branch snapped beneath his foot. The werewolf with the icy eyes snapped its head up, their gazes locked. Nick froze, and he understood. This creature wasn't just a mindless killer. No, it was thinking. There was calculation in its gaze, curiosity, and something else. Something dark, something ancient. The beast growled. In a single leap, it closed the distance between them. Nick barely had time to react before a massive clawed hand struck his chest, sending him sprawling to the ground. The air was knocked from his lungs. The world spun around him. "No!" Eric roared and lunged at the second werewolf, sinking his fangs into its shoulder. The beast howled, but did not fall. Instead, it raked its claws across Eric's side, dark blood spraying onto the forest floor. Nick, fighting through the pain, began to crawl backward. He had to get out. He had to. But something inside him whispered. This was only the beginning. Then the forest filled with a new sound. A howl, but not a single voice. A chorus, deep, primal. Nick froze. They were not alone. The howls echoed through the trees, sinking into his very bones. His skin crawled, his heartbeat hammering against his ribs. They were not alone. Eric staggered, his wounds still bleeding, but he refused to fall. The second werewolf stepped back, turning its head toward the darkness. It heard them too. Nick scanned the trees. And then, they appeared. Shadows emerged from between the trunks, huge, powerful figures. Their eyes glowed in the night, their movements fluid, yet predatory. 1, 2, 5, 10. Nick realized he was standing in a place that did not belong to men. Eric struggled to his feet, breathing heavily. He looked at Nick, then at the approaching wolves. "Run!" he rasped. But it was already too late. The largest of the wolves stepped forward. Its fur was black as the abyss, its eyes the color of molten embers. It lifted its head and spoke. "You should not have come here, human." The voice was deep, echoing from the very darkness itself. Fear gripped Nick's chest. These were not just animals. They were something far older, something that had lived in these woods long before men. He tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. "You have seen too much." The wolf tilted its head. "Now you have two choices: die or become one of us." The forest fell silent. Nick felt ice settle in his veins. He looked at Eric, but the young man said nothing. "The choice is yours, human," the black wolf said. Its voice was calm, yet heavy with menace. What now? Nick knew the choice had already been made. The only question was he ready to face the consequences? Nick stood frozen, unable to move. The forest felt alive, breathing, watching him through dozens of burning eyes. These creatures were not ordinary beasts. They were waiting. "What if I refuse?" he finally asked. The black wolf bared its fangs in something akin to a smile. "Then you die here." A chill ran down Nick's spine. Eric swayed on his feet, gripping his wounded side. His blood still seeped into the earth. "Nick," he rasped, "I never wanted you to be part of this, but if you make this choice, you can't go back." Nick stared at him, barely able to comprehend what he was hearing. This boy, he had once been just a normal person. What did they do to you? Eric looked away. "The same thing that will happen to you." The black wolf took a step closer. Its clawed paws moved soundlessly over the ground. "Decide." The world narrowed to this one moment. Run. Useless. They would catch him. Fight. Laughable. He had no chance. Only one option remained. "What will happen to me?" he asked. The wolf tilted its head. "You will cease to be who you were. You will become part of the pack. You will forget the taste of ordinary food, forget what it's like to walk among humans without hiding. You will live in the night." Nick swallowed hard. "And if I say yes?" The black wolf leaned in, its hot breath brushing against Nick's face. "Then we begin." Eric shut his eyes. "I'm sorry." And then pain pierced through Nick's body like a burning knife. Fangs sank into his shoulder, and he screamed as something foreign, dark and powerful seeped into his blood. And then the world exploded in pain. It was all-consuming. It burned him from the inside, tearing through every cell in his body. Nick screamed, but the sound was muffled by the thunder of his own blood roaring in his ears. His muscles spasmed violently, bones breaking and mending themselves in an endless cycle. His skin felt as if it was aflame, burning from within. Darkness clouded his vision, his heart hammering as though it wanted to burst apart. This wasn't just pain. This was something ancient awakening inside him. Distant voices echoed. Will he survive? He will, or he'll die. The words felt far away, as though he was hearing them from underwater. And then, darkness. When Nick came to, he was lying on the ground. The night was as dark as before, but now he saw it differently. The forest didn't just surround him, it was alive. He could hear the insects rustling in the grass meters away, feel the movement of the air. Sense. He inhaled, and his body froze. The scent of earth, the scent of blood, the scent of fear. He sat up sharply, and immediately he knew something was wrong. His fingers were no longer fingers. His skin was no longer human. He raised his hands, clawed paws. He had changed. Panic surged through him. His heart pounded, and he wanted to scream. But instead, A low, guttural growl rumbled from his throat. "Calm down." Nick looked up. The black wolf stood before him. But now, he saw him differently. Not just as a beast, but as a leader. "You are one of us now." Nick panted heavily. This... Accept it. Or fight it. But you will never be the same." A wolf howled in the distance. Nick felt something awaken inside him, something dark, unknown, primal. And he understood. There was no going back. Nick stood on all fours, his breath ragged. His entire body trembled, not from cold, but from something deeper. He felt power coursing through his veins. His muscles were stronger, his hearing sharper, his nose catching dozens of scents at once. He was no longer human. The black wolf watched him, unmoving. "You feel it, don't you?" His voice was steady, confident. Nick lifted his head. A storm raged inside him. What did you do to me?" The leader smirked. "I gave you a new life. You are one of us now." Nick struggled to stand, but were these even legs? He looked down and saw powerful limbs covered in thick, dark fur. His body, it was beastly. No. Panic swallowed him whole. He took a step back, then another. "Run!" The instinct screamed inside him. "Run!" And he bolted. The world blurred. The wind lashed against his face, and his paws carried him forward at an inhuman speed. Trees flashed past, yet he did not stumble. His body moved effortlessly, naturally, as if it had always been this way. But then, a roar sounded behind him, and in an instant, they were chasing him. The pack. Nick heard them closing in. Their paws pounded against the earth, but they weren't rushing. They were playing. They knew he wouldn't escape. And then he felt it. Hunger. A true, all-consuming hunger. The first hunger of a werewolf. And then, a deer appeared before him. Its heart pounded wildly. The scent of blood filled the air. And Nick leaped. The deer didn't even have time to react. Nick struck like a bolt of lightning. His claws tore through flesh, and his fangs clamped down on the animal's throat. The scent of blood hit him, awakening something primal. Hunger. He felt the deer thrashing beneath him, felt its heart hammering. And at that moment, something inside him snapped. All human thoughts vanished. Only the beast remained. He tore, ripped, drank deep, and it felt natural. It felt right. He wasn't thinking anymore. He was feeling. And then a voice pierced through his consciousness. Enough. Nick froze. His breathing was ragged. His muzzle was covered in blood. He lifted his head and saw the black wolf. The leader watched him, head tilted slightly. "Do you feel it?" Nick panted, unable to speak. "This is true power." The black wolf stepped closer, his eyes gleaming in the dark. "You are one of us now, but ahead lies a choice. Accept your new nature, or burn in the fire of your own weakness." Nick looked down at the deer's body. His hands, no, his paws, were covered in blood, and then it hit him. He didn't feel disgust. He felt pleasure. The black wolf smirked. "You're beginning to understand." And then, the pack howled. Nick couldn't stop himself. He howled with them. The night forest echoed their cries. The sound cut through the air, bouncing off the trees, sinking into the deepest corners of his mind. This wasn't just a howl. It was a call. Nick stood among the pack, his heart hammering. A storm raged within him. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. He had to fight. But against whom? Them or himself? The black wolf stepped forward, locking eyes with him. "Do you feel the world shifting?" Nick didn't answer. "You are no longer just a man. You are part of something greater." He fell silent, letting Nick process the words. Nick's voice trembled. I don't know who I am. The Black Wolf nodded. That is the first step. He cast his gaze over the pack before turning back to Nick. But now you must choose. Nick clenched his paws. Choose what? To follow the call of blood, or to turn away? The pack stirred, growling lowly. Turn away? What did that even mean? He glanced at Eric. The man watched him in silence, something deep flickering in his eyes. Nick swallowed hard. And if I don't choose? The Black Wolf smirked. Then fate will choose for you. And in that moment, a howl rose from the depths of the forest. It was not one of theirs. The pack instantly froze, and Nick realized they were not the only hunters in these woods. The forest held its breath. The air thickened, heavy with tension, like the stillness before a storm. Moonlight filtered through the branches, but the shadows around them deepened, as if anticipating something. The foreign howl echoed through the trees. Low, menacing, alien. Nick felt the fur on his nape rise. What is that? His voice was hoarse. The Black Wolf didn't move. They've come. The pack stared into the darkness, muscles coiled. Low growls rumbled from every direction. Who are they? Nick clenched his claws. The Black Wolf looked at him. Those who see us as prey. Brittle branches snapped somewhere nearby. Nick turned his head. Shadows moved. They were everywhere. The branches creaked under their weight, and dry leaves rustled beneath their paws. And then Nick saw their eyes, red, burning in the darkness, devoid of all humanity. These were not ordinary werewolves. These were monsters. The pack growled, closing ranks. Do not retreat! The Black Wolf's voice was firm. They were ready for battle. But Nick could feel it. This would not be just a fight. This would be a battle for survival. The shadows thickened, and then they emerged, the monsters. Nick could smell them. The earth beneath their paws was wet with blood, and the gaze of these creatures promised nothing good. They were massive. Their bodies remained hidden in the darkness, but their eyes burned brightly, an undeniable threat. They weren't like regular werewolves. These weren't just beasts. They were creatures born from darkness itself, the kind that made blood run cold. Nick felt that storm rising within him again, that hunger. They are not like us. The Black Wolf's voice was hollow, his face like stone. They were born in the very pits of hell, and their only purpose is to destroy us. Nick clenched his paws. He could feel them. These creatures were dangerous, and their approach felt like a thickening fog, wrapping around every fiber of his being. The pack was forming battle lines, but it was clear they couldn't win a direct confrontation against these monsters. One of the creatures, the largest, stepped forward. His eyes glowed red, his muzzle covered in gruesome scars. He smiled, baring his teeth. You cannot run. His voice was deep, eerie, like the forest itself. The Black Wolf growled but did not move forward. Hold nothing back. His words were steady, filled with resolve. Fight for your life. Nick felt something shifting inside him. This wasn't just a fight. This was the moment he could choose. Would he fight for his place in this world, or would he let the darkness consume him? The fate of his new being, his new self, depended on this moment. The massive monster took another step forward, his claws clicking as he exhaled. You don't belong to this world, boy. His words dripped with mockery. Nick felt his body tense, that hunger for battle flooding his mind. What would he choose? Will you stand against me? The monster asked, stepping closer. But before Nick could answer, the pack of werewolves lunged into battle. Nick stopped thinking. He felt only one thing: bloodlust. His chest pounded with the wild, feral heartbeat of a beast, and every movement was filled with untamed fury. The pack charged forward, and the monsters didn't hesitate to strike back. Claws clashed like blades, and teeth met in the air with a thunderous impact. Nick felt his paws tearing through flesh, his fangs sinking into throats, and the blood pouring in a frenzied rush. He didn't stop. Every strike, every movement was precise, his body operating on instinct, overriding all else. One of the monsters lunged straight at him. Nick met it head-on, twisting in the air and sinking his teeth into its throat. He felt the bones crack beneath his claws, the flesh tearing apart, and the creature's agonizing scream echoed through the forest. Blood splattered across his face, and he wasn't sure what excited him more, the pain or the act of killing itself. But amid the chaos and horror, there was a moment when he felt something new, power unlike anything he had known before. He was becoming the beast. He was the beast. The creature he had slain collapsed onto the ground. Nick stepped back, catching his breath, his gaze shifting to where his pack was still locked in battle. "Kill them all!" Black Wolf roared as one of the creatures sank its claws into his side. But he didn't falter, and Nick knew he had to fight to the bitter end. He leaped, delivering a decisive blow to his enemy. His claws pierced through the ribcage, his fangs crushed the skull. Blood sprayed, drenching the earth beneath him. His animal instincts demanded more. He was a predator, and nothing could stop him. He kept attacking, his body already bloodied and battered, moving with deadly precision. He tore through another creature, feeling its final breath slip away in his grasp, and he didn't slow down. Then, on the horizon, the last monster appeared, the strongest, the largest. It wrenched its fallen kin from Nick's jaws and struck him with a single, devastating blow, sending him reeling. This was an opponent Nick couldn't defeat alone. Black Wolf sprang up beside him, his eyes burning with fury. "You can do this," he growled before launching himself at the beast. With every strike, blood splattered onto the ground, mixing with the dirt. With every second, the fight became more savage, more brutal. Nick felt his body weakening, but he couldn't stop. At last, the monster fell, and with its final breath, silence reclaimed the forest. Nick stood among the corpses, his body covered in blood, his breathing heavy and ragged. Around him, peace had returned, but he knew it would never be the same. He looked at Black Wolf. The older warrior stood beside him, his eyes filled with something Nick hadn't seen before. Respect. "You've passed the trial." But Nick understood. This was far from over. His blood was now bound to theirs, forever. He took a step forward, and deep inside, his primal instinct still craved more. He had made his choice. The wind died down, and silence swallowed the forest once more. But for Nick and his pack, it was deafening. They had survived, but the cost was steep. Every breath was labored, every movement laced with pain. The ground was littered with bodies, both friend and foe. Blood soaked the earth, its scent thick in the air. Nick could feel his beast still demanding blood, but he knew he had to stop, for now. Black Wolf stepped toward him, his body marked with fresh scars, his eyes burning like fire. "You're young, but you've passed the trial, Nick," he said, his deep voice laced with exhaustion. "You're one of us now." Nick didn't answer, only nodded. He knew his journey was just beginning, but something dark inside him refused to settle. This was only the start. "They'll come back," Black Wolf said, surveying the battlefield. "The creatures we just killed, they weren't alone. We have an enemy we never knew existed." Nick clenched his teeth. The weight of those words hit him like a blow. The enemy was greater than they had imagined. Their silence was shattered when new figures emerged from the darkness of the forest. This time, they were not alone. Massive shadows stretched across the ground like living darkness, and Nick felt his heart clench. This was something different, something even more dangerous. Black Wolf rose to his feet, his gaze unyielding. "Nick, be ready. This isn't just another battle. This is our final test. If we fail, We die." Nick met his gaze, and a fire ignited in his eyes. They had survived this fight, but it wasn't enough. They had to win. The shadows thickened, but now Nick could see their true forms. The creatures stepping out of the forest were just like the ones they had just fought. But something was wrong. These new monsters were stronger, their forms more twisted, more terrifying. They moved like living darkness, their soulless black eyes gleaming with hunger. Nick felt the air grow heavier, his movements becoming sluggish. This wasn't just a battle. This was a test of survival. The Black Wolf spoke again, but this time his voice was so heavy, it seemed like he could barely contain his unease. "They are not what we thought. These aren't just beasts. They are creatures born from the very heart of darkness. Their victims are more than just people." Nick felt his blood boil. He had been ready for a fight, but these monsters, this new enemy, were something else entirely. What do they want? One of the creatures stepped forward, its voice slithering through the night like a wicked whisper. "You have ruled this land for too long. It is time for you to be forgotten." The words felt like a curse. These things were no ordinary beings. Nick knew they were facing something that couldn't be defeated by mere strength. This was darkness itself, ancient, unfathomable. "Stay together," the Black Wolf whispered, his voice low but firm. He knew that fighting alone would only lead to death. Nick understood instantly. Sticking together was their only chance. He felt his will to survive fuse with the strength of his brothers and sisters in the pack. But the creatures kept advancing, moving without hesitation, as if they felt no pain, no fear. Their bodies were cloaked in fur as dark as the void, and their eyes burned with an unnatural glow. They were born of darkness, and their hunger for destruction knew no bounds. Nick took a deep breath and let out a ferocious roar. He could not wait any longer. He was ready to tear through anything in his path, to survive, to protect his pack. He lunged into battle, and it was brutal. Nick did not stop. He fought like a beast, a true predator, unable to halt his onslaught until pain reminded him of his limits, until he felt death creeping closer. But something inside him was ready to fight this nightmare until the bitter end. The monster he faced was no weaker than the others. Its claws, sharp as shards of ice, slashed through the air with terrifying speed. But Nick dodged, weaving, striking back. He knew that if he gave it even a moment to recover, it would devour him. Sliding across the ground, he felt the dirt beneath his claws, the blood staining his fur, the hellish chaos swallowing them whole. But there was no turning back. He fought with savage fury, like a beast who knew only one law: kill or be killed. Roars echoed through the forest, shaking the earth. These creatures weren't just strong, they were fearless, steeped in dark magic. Every glance from them felt like a death sentence, and the world around them seemed to collapse into a black abyss. The Black Wolf attacked from the other side, his vicious strikes tearing through the monsters' bodies. But they did not retreat. If anything, their numbers seemed to grow. Every move they made was synchronized, as if they were all part of a single mind. Nick knew he couldn't fight alone anymore. He needed them, his pack. He let out a howl, calling them to battle. And they came, their rage igniting like wildfire. Together they moved as one. But the creatures didn't just stand by. They seized one of the younger wolves in the pack and tore him apart. That moment changed everything. The scent of his packmate's blood filled the air, and for Nick, there was no room for hesitation. "Kill them all," he snarled, gathering his strength for a final strike. The monster before him was unlike the rest. It radiated power, an ancient force no weapon could destroy. Nick knew he had to use his own strength, his own fury to end it. He leapt, aiming for its chest, but the creature caught him midair, slamming him into the ground. Nick felt his bones crack under its weight. Gritting his teeth, he drove his claws into the earth beneath him, summoning something hidden deep within. Suddenly, his body burned with raw power, rage, and untamed fury. The wind around him howled, and for the first time, the darkness recoiled, his gaze locked with the monsters. And then, something happened that none of them expected. Nick's energy, his will, filled the space around them, and the creature, once thought invincible, began to wither beneath it. The dark magic that had fueled it for centuries drained away. Nick clenched his claws, and something inside the beast shattered. It collapsed to the ground like a shadow stripped of its form. But it was only one, and the others were not done. The black wolf stood beside him, his eyes gleaming with cold determination. He understood now. This battle could only be won together. But the fight was far from over. More and more creatures emerged from the swirling darkness, as if the night itself had summoned them. Each clash became deadlier. The air burned with tension, the battlefield teetering on the edge of despair. And then, Nick saw it. Amidst the horde of monsters, one figure stood apart. It was not a beast, not a creature of the abyss. It was human. But its face was marked with deep, dark sigils, and its eyes burned with something inhuman. It did not fight. It only watched. Nick froze. This stranger was unlike anyone they had encountered before. He appeared to be a mage, but his power stemmed from a darkness unlike anything Nick had ever faced in battle. "Do you feel it?" The man's voice was like a whisper carried by the cold wind. "This isn't just a fight. This is only the beginning. The one who has come for you does not belong to this world. He is not human. He has come for your souls." A chill ran through Nick's veins. He didn't know what this being was, but it wasn't just magic. It was something that manipulated the very essence of existence, a force that seeped into the core of their being. In that moment, even the black wolf felt his will falter. Everything became unclear, as though reality itself was bending. But the mage continued. "You've been searching for answers, Nick. You thought you were one of them, but you are not like the others. You are cursed. You cannot escape it. The dark power is already within you. It grows and consumes you." With every word, Nick felt something stir inside him, like a fire burning deep within. His breathing grew heavy, and the world around him began to blur into a misty haze. He took a step forward, trying to break free from whatever was pulling him under, but his body suddenly yielded to the darkness. He felt every muscle tense, as if an unseen force had seized control of him. He was no longer himself. He was becoming part of the very shadow he had always despised. The black wolf, seeing Nick lose control, lunged forward, his voice a desperate roar. "Nick! Don't give in. It's a trap. The darkness wants to consume your soul. You can fight it. You must fight it." But the mage, sensing the resistance, raised his hand and directed it toward Nick. In an instant, dark energy surged around him. Nick let out a cry as his body trembled violently. At that moment, he felt something ancient awakening within his soul. Their eyes met, and something terrible happened. Something inside Nick stirred, a dark presence, an ancient curse that had lain dormant in his blood since birth. This was what he had been running from, but now it had awoken. Nick stood in the midst of the raging battle, his body still trembling from the dark force within. But his mind was unraveling, struggling to grasp what was happening. He saw the mage again, watching him with a gaze filled with eerie fascination. Meanwhile, the monstrous creatures continued their advance. Their snarls and growls filled the air. But there was something different about them now. Not just rage, but hesitation. As if they sensed something even more terrifying. It wasn't coincidence. In their eyes, there was a hidden fear, as if they had unwittingly become part of something far worse. But the mage, ignoring the chaos around him, spoke again. "You still don't understand, do you? You are no longer who you once were. With each passing moment, you become darker. This power, it is not just inside you. You are its vessel." Nick's heart pounded. Everything he had known up to this moment felt meaningless. He was not just a werewolf. He was part of something greater, something cursed. And this mage, this man, was responsible for his suffering. Nick stepped forward, but his movements were sluggish, as though his own body no longer belonged to him. A moment ago, his will had been fierce, but now, he couldn't stop his hand from trembling. "You won't defeat me," the mage said, his voice laced with cruel amusement. "Even if you survive this battle, you will never escape your fate. You are already becoming what you fear the most." The words struck him like lightning, and he felt his will slipping away. He couldn't fight it any longer. The white-hot surge of darkness was overwhelming, consuming everything inside him. Then suddenly, he heard a voice. It was the Black Wolf. His furious snarl cut through the haze like a beacon of strength. "You're still with us, Nick. You are not lost yet." With those words, the Black Wolf leaped, striking the mage and knocking him to the ground. The dark energy surrounding them shattered instantly. It was as if the world had come back into focus, like a blinding light burning through the fog. The mage slowly rose, his expression unreadable, but in his eyes, there was a mocking glint. "You cannot escape, Nick," he whispered. "I will show you who you really are." The darkness thickened. It wasn't just an absence of light, it was alive. It crawled like tendrils through the earth, wrapping itself around Nick like invisible chains. The very air trembled with power, as if something ancient was awakening. "You will be mine," the mage declared, lifting his hands to the sky. "You will become one with the eternal darkness." Nick felt it pulling at him, dragging him into the abyss. But suddenly, something ignited inside him. This wasn't just resistance, it was an explosion, an uncontainable force that he had never felt before. A massive surge of energy erupted from within him, searing through the shadows with terrifying intensity. The mage faltered for a split second, his eyes widening in shock. Nick saw it, the dark forces surrounding his enemy beginning to wither, dissolving like mist before an inferno. But it came at a cost. He felt something shifting inside him. His mind reeled, his body twisted into something ancient and unknown. This was his true nature, but he still didn't understand what it meant. Meanwhile, the sorcerer began to weaken, his face twisted in rage. He knew he had lost something irreplaceable. But for Nick, only one thing mattered now. He hadn't given up. Nick could feel his body struggling with this new reality. The energy coursing through him was not just power, it was something that felt like a rebirth. He realized that his decision could change everything he had ever known about himself. But with each step into this new state, unpredictability and danger lurked. The sorcerer, though weakened, rose again. His eyes burned in the darkness, his lips curling into a sinister grin. "You think you can stop this? You're nothing but a puppet in someone else's hands, Nick. Your power is not your own. You cannot control it." His voice was as cold as ice, but beneath the threat, there was also a twisted delight. He had finally revealed the truth. Nick swallowed hard. Those words echoed in his mind. His entire existence had been a lie from the very beginning. He was not a choice. He was not who he thought he was. But reality stood before him. The sorcerer was weakened. This was his chance, and Nick couldn't afford to waste it. He felt the surge of energy shifting within him, his eyes beginning to glow a bright, bloody red. The Black Wolf watched Nick with tension, but also with understanding. He knew their battle was only beginning, and every moment would be crucial. Yet he still believed that there was humanity left in Nick, that he could use this power to destroy the sorcerer. "Do it, Nick," the wolf roared. "You're not alone. Believe in your strength. You are not just a weapon, you are the chosen one." With those words, Nick felt the dark power spiraling out of control, but at that moment, his mind sharpened. Yes, the energy inside him was overwhelming, but it was still not his choice. And yet he understood his power now more than ever before. Nick stepped forward and unleashed everything within him. The wave of darkness, once ready to consume him, now became his weapon. He directed it straight at the sorcerer, and in the next instant, everything exploded. The sorcerer tried to resist, but his strength wasn't enough. In a flash, he vanished into a cloud of black smoke. But Nick didn't stop. He knew this victory was only temporary. It didn't solve the bigger problem. "You haven't defeated me," the sorcerer's voice echoed, now distant, as if the shadows themselves were speaking. "You cannot escape your true path. You are neither human nor beast. You are the one meant to bring the world to its end." Though weak, the sorcerer's words continued to ring in his ears. Nick felt something dark stir within his soul. Thoughts spun wildly in his mind, refusing to let him go. A cold sweat trickled down his forehead, and his heart pounded. The sorcerer's words clung to him like a curse, and he couldn't shake the feeling that his fate had already been sealed. But he couldn't afford to give in. He knew that his next step had to be decisive. He turned and, without a word, hurried toward the Black Wolf. The wolf had been watching the battle the entire time, ready to step in at any moment. His gaze was steady, and in his eyes, Nick saw more than just support. He saw understanding. The Black Wolf wasn't just watching over him. He was guiding him, helping him find his way despite the darkness that surrounded him. As Nick approached, the wolf said nothing, simply waiting for him to make his own choice. There was no fear in his eyes, only deep respect. "What do I do?" Nick exhaled, his voice heavy with doubt. The wolf stepped forward slowly, his voice low but firm. "You must do more than win a battle. That is not the true challenge. You must win against yourself. You have endured too much to be what others want you to be. You are no longer just a werewolf. You are becoming something more, someone who defines his own destiny." Nick felt the weight of understanding settle over him. His mind cleared, and he realized that every step he took could no longer be dictated by outside forces. He had to be the one in control. The sorcerer, his power, it was all part of a long journey he had to complete. And this was not just a fight against enemies. It was a fight against his own inner demons, against what he had become. "I can't control the darkness they gave me," Nick admitted, feeling the heavy truth settle in his bones. "But I can understand it. I can learn to wield what's inside me." The Black Wolf watched him closely, and for the first time, Nick saw something in his expression. Pride. "It won't be easy," the wolf warned, "but only you can decide who you will be in the end. You know you are capable of more. Just remember, each step forward will be harder. The darkness inside you will try to pull you from your path, but you will choose how to wield it." Their eyes met, and Nick was overcome by a wave of determination. His power was growing, but this time, it was something different. It was not just wild rage or a curse. It was a choice he had made himself. Suddenly, the sky darkened, and a thick fog rolled in, swirling into dense clouds. It seemed as if everything around them was being swallowed by the darkness. But in that moment, Nick felt something else, something stronger. The light within him burned brighter than ever before. The mage didn't disappear. He was somewhere nearby, his powers stretched to their breaking point. But Nick knew one thing. He was ready for the next step. He was ready to use his strength to finish everything that had begun. And in that moment, he realized that his inner conflict might not be over yet, but he was not alone. Nick stood at the top of the hill, gazing at the distant glow. The mist began to dissipate, and the first light of dawn penetrated the earth, waking it from its nocturnal slumber. The power inside him raged, but now it was his ally, not his enemy. Nick knew this moment was decisive, and he had to act with full confidence. The Black Wolf stood beside him, silent, as if he had become part of this land, a part of the ancient shadow guarding him. They remained silent, but there was no need for words between them. Their path was clear. "Are you ready?" the wolf finally asked, his eyes reflecting genuine concern and understanding. Nick turned to him and nodded with a faint smile. He was ready, despite the weight of his past. "I'm ready." His voice was firm, more than ever before. It hadn't even been a few minutes before the cold air returned, and the ground beneath their feet trembled. Dark forces began to gather once more, and Nick felt something ancient stirring deep within the earth. He knew this was the moment the mage was preparing to return. Nick could sense his approach, a faint yet unwavering presence. From the darkness, growing ever clearer, emerged the mage himself. His face was pale, like a dead star, his eyes gleaming with a sinister light. But this time, his power was weaker than before. He was wounded, but still dangerous. "Do you think you've won?" His voice was filled with rage, his words hissing through the air like snakes. "You've just freed me again. You can't control anything." Nick knew those words were empty threats. He was no longer the person who could be controlled by this mage. With every step he took, he grew stronger, and now the true power was in his hands, not in curses or monsters, but in the fact that he had accepted himself. The mage stepped forward, and suddenly the air around them shook again. It was a blow that made the earth shudder. But Nick didn't retreat. He simply stepped forward, not giving the mage time for another attack. In his eyes burned a fire that wasn't so much darkness as it was wisdom. "Your end has come," Nick said, his voice full of confidence. "I no longer obey you." The mage lunged forward, but Nick, feeling his movements, simply raised his hand. In that instant, the mage froze as if his power had been completely absorbed. Nick swallowed it up, like a river swallowing a stream, controlling the darkness instead of being its slave. He used all his strength to stop the mage, to absorb him into his own power. Suddenly, the mage began to vanish. His body was consumed by the dark energy, and Nick felt his inner world become even stronger, the power consolidating in one place. He understood that he had finally freed himself. When it was over, the mage was gone, and the mist had dissipated. The earth returned to its normal state, but everything was different. Inside, Nick was not just calm, but also a sense of satisfaction that he had not succumbed to the temptation of darkness. He had made the choice to be himself, even if it meant confronting the very essence of his own power. The Black Wolf approached him, and now, in his gaze, there was no regret or fear. He knew that Nick had become what he was meant to be. "You made the right choice. You didn't just defeat the mage, you defeated yourself." "You can be whoever you want," the wolf said. Nick nodded, his heart finally at peace. He knew that now, everything would be different. He was not just a werewolf. He was a man who had realized his power and could now control it. But his journey was not over. This was just the beginning. He knew that more trials lay ahead. But now, he was ready for them,